We sit
there.
We sit in the pit of masturbation.
Right there.
The pit of masturbation.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's because empty as all over the floor.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Sean Anderson, Most Valuable Podcast, and the upcoming segment is from our full Fast Break podcast that we recorded. And if you do want to check out that full podcast, head over to Blog Talk Radio/The Fast Break. You'll be able to find the full podcast over there. But we talked about the Boston Celtics. Now let's move on to the Boston Celtics. And obviously a lot of trade rumors flowing around them. And people are saying they missed out on a start, that Danny Ainge didn't pull the trigger. And, we talked about Jimmy Butler, and you wanted to, hold off on talking about the true deal about Jimmy Butler going to the Boston Celtics. There was also Paul George rumors. So do you think that the Boston Celtics did miss out on a star, and they've kind of missed their window of opportunity to hit a star?
I don't think they missed their window entirely. And the reason I say that is because I almost want to write this year off as a Warriors-Cavs. Like, it's locked in unless something terrible happens to one of these teams. It's done. And I think that this playoff, postseason run will kind of be that measuring stick of what do we truly need to compete. We saw last year in the playoffs what Isaiah Thomas could do. I think he's far and above better player than he was then. They added Al Horford, so we'll see how effective he can be. I really think that this is they're going to make a move in this postseason, after this postseason. So in between, draft day, I feel like there's going to be a whole lot of Danny Ainge time. Maybe a whole Danny Ainge day we'll just dedicate to him. Him and his crazy rumors and trades and, how many 17 first-round picks we need to give up.
Well, they only have one first-round pick. They only have one first-round pick, and they don't even own their own first-round pick.
No, we need to give up 17 to get someone from them.
That's
how this works.
It's
always.
Or
it's always
just talking about
Danny
Bulls
Ainge.
because they're giving up a second-round pick.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that it's more of is, people are saying they missed out because they currently have the number one pick in Brooklyn with the best chances to win the lottery. So I think that's why people are saying they missed out on that opportunity.
Chances, though.
That's the thing
I feel like that's what scared teams is if you could guarantee me a 1, great. But if I can get 1 to 4. Is it really worth a 4 to give up a superstar for?
Well, I think it's more of the fact that the Celtics didn't want to give it up. And I don't think the Celtics wanted to give up that Brooklyn pick.
There were rumors that, they had 2 Brooklyn picks on the table.
What they wanted to do is, there was rumor, but I think it was also shut down by Nick Friedel.
Probably. Because that'd be crazy.
What I've heard was the rumors for both Paul George and I was going to say
Jimmy Butler.
For Jimmy Butler, Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, and the 2017 first-round pick. That's the Brooklyn Nets. So that's the 3 the 4 things that I have heard. So Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, and the 2017 first round pick for the Nets because they have the ability to swap with the Nets.
All 4 of those things locked into one deal, or I thought it was the pick plus 2 out of the 3. Or
no, I've heard it's those.
Holy cow!
Those
all
3.
4 assets,
and they didn't want to give up Jay Crowder, and that's why it wasn't pulled.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about speculation,
rumor mill.
But I don't blame Danny Ainge for not pulling the trigger because right now you have a playoff team. Right now you have the second best team in the East from a standing standpoint.
Yep.
You look at this and I don't see a reason to blow it up completely because Jimmy Butler's fantastic, Paul George's fantastic, but I'm looking more to next year where you'll have at least a top pick, and you most likely have the number 1 overall pick from the Nets. You'll have the ability to take a guy like Marcus Smart or Lonzo Ball. You'll be
Markelle Fultz.
What did I say? Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
Fuck me. Markelle Fultz or Lonzo Ball, and you'll be able to have that guy be able to replace Isaiah Thomas because again, like we were talking about the max contract thing, you won't need to. You're not forced to give Isaiah Thomas a max contract because you might have a guy like Fultz or Ball to be able to replace him. And then also you look at the upcoming free agent class, Gordon Hayward's going to be a free agent. And the one thing about Gordon Hayward is obviously we know the connection to Butler between him and Brad Stevens. So if you're looking for a superstar, you might be able to not give up anything like that Nets pick, either of them, either the 2018 or this one that's coming up, and be able to bring in a guy like Gordon Hayward and draft a guy like Fultz. So then you could have Fultz, Bradley, Smart, Crowder, Hayward, and Al Horford. I don't see the reason to rush to get a star in Boston, especially because then you're just giving another year to LeBron James to age. I don't think there's a true rush in the Celtic land to trade for a guy like Butler or Jimmy Butler or Paul George. I think what the Celtics are doing is actually ridiculously smart because you're going to lose some trade value for the picks, but I think you're still going to be able to get a guy like Butler or Paul George or a guy like Hayward. I don't think there's a rush because you have so much down the line, and that's why I don't think Danny Ainge is looking towards more of the future instead of right now, because you can build a superstar team with the picks that you currently have.
Yeah, no, I think that it's not the popular move across the board.
It's not the sexy move.
Everybody wants to win now, and I think that Danny Ainge is a bit more realistic with the LeBron James is in the East. It's going to take a whole lot to get past him, and if I have to give up the core of my team that's got me to the number 2 seed, Marcus Smart's amazing defense and his shot that's coming along now, then you have, it's just like giving up him would be a lot. So maybe him plus a pick. All right, maybe that's possible. But if we're asking for Crowder, if we're asking for Bradley, no, that is what got you there. You don't give that up. I respect him for doing that. And I think that by taking the time to wait until this off season, they're only helping themselves. This is a team that's they've got players overseas who have been ready to come over. They're not bringing them over because the roster is locked. Yeah. I think they do get an extra spot or two this upcoming year to do D-League slots, though. So that'll be interesting how they use those.
There's something in the CBA like that.
Or the G League because it's Gatorade.
Yeah, they bought the D-League.
No, I think that the Celtics team, they are overloaded with assets, and that's why teams were like, you got so many picks, you got so many guys waiting in the wings, why don't you just move some guys? Why do I have to do it now? And all they do is, if you wait until the offseason, now Paul George has 1.5 less year on his contract, which makes him less valuable to teams around the league.
And he's talking about going to the Lakers. He's talking about if the Pacers are able.
That was interesting.
Yeah, well, he's a LA kid, so he wants to go play for his hometown. You even talk about the Celtics, where you have the Pacers, where if you increase your chances, you'll be able to give him more money, and if he can win a finals, then that's why he's going to want to stay. So I think there's a lot going there with Paul George, even Jimmy Butler. A lot of I don't want to say about character issues, but very outspoken.
Yeah.
You have a team that's very not outspoken. Maybe Isaiah Thomas is the most outspoken, but he's not even saying anything bad.
Just emojis.
Just tweeting emojis on Twitter. But the thing is that there's a difference between the Bulls and the Celtics, and teams like the Bulls, the Celtics, and the Knicks. The Knicks, Bulls, and Celtics are in a rush, and they just want to keep their team relevant, or they want to be a finals contender. And that's the one thing with the Bulls, Knicks, and Celtics. They want it. With the Celtics is there's a reason.
Wait, I'm confused. You said the Celtics twice.
I'm sorry. I'm messing up. Bulls, Lakers, and Knicks.
Oh, okay.
So the Bulls, Lakers, and Knicks are teams that are always on a rush. They're always on a rush to become finals contenders. They're always on a rush because they're in that big market.
They always have to be relevant. Yeah.
Where Boston, you have the team that's won the most championships for a reason, because they commit to a rebuild, and they commit to coming back. Because after Bill Russell, you had to wait till Larry Bird, but then you had a dynasty there. From Larry Bird, you had to wait for Paul Pierce. Then you had a dynasty there. Then from Rondo, and then from Pierce, you went to the Rondo era where it was completely just down in the dumps. Then you now have this new era of Isaiah Thomas and this wealth of picks from trading Paul Pierce. So the thing with Boston is Boston fans are willing to commit to a rebuild for a dynasty because they've had so many dynasties. You look at the Boston Celtics in the early 2000s. The Boston Bruins in the early 2000s. Some team named the Patriots. I don't know if you heard of them. The Boston Celtics before, where they won 11 rings.
Championship town.
It's town championships. I'm missing one team. Am I? No. NHL.
Red Sox.
Red Sox. You ever hear about them? I mean, look at what they've been doing since 2004. So Boston is committed to a rebuild because they know what their teams can do, and they know what their market can do. They're the city of championships, the most championships in any city in American sports, if you count the Big Four. So the thing with Boston is they commit to a rebuild, and they see what they have ahead, and they see that they can get Fultz. They see that they can have a number 1 pick in next year. They see the ability of Jaylen Brown. They see the ability of Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder as guys that can really commit, and even Marcus Smart. He's really young, and they just signed Al Horford. There's a lot there in Beantown for people to like, and I think there shouldn't be a rush to go out and get a Jimmy Butler or trade for a Jimmy Butler or Paul George. That's the one thing is that's really worrying about, seeing people on Twitter saying the Celtics are losers of the trade deadline because they didn't get a star. Well, there was no talk about them getting a star going up to the trade deadline, or there wasn't really there wasn't a heightened thing. There wasn't like
you need to do this or else.
But there also wasn't a thing from like the media saying they're actively seeking to get a Paul George or Jimmy Butler. This really came out in the past 2 days. There wasn't this huge outcry. I mean, people were saying, well, the Celtics make sense because they have assets. That's the only thing that they're saying. There was no real big thing coming out of Boston
at the previous draft day, and that's where it came from.
But so even through the season, there wasn't that many talks going on.
No, it just felt like the smart move because why not? You've got all these guys, you've got more upcoming draft picks. Why not move them? Get somebody, win now with Isaiah, because everybody sees Isaiah Thomas as the guy who has taken this franchise and elevated it, and they want to win around him. But guess what? He's already up there in the years.
29 years old.
29 years old. He'll be on a contract year next year. So you're talking about, all right, so we've got a aging superstar who is, just in his prime at the moment, but we're going to watch that next contract will be his big contract. So he's going to want max. I think that they're smart because like you said, you'll have Jaylen Brown already. You've got a lot of young assets, and then you're going to have Markelle Fultz, Lonzo Ball, one of the two probably. But you're going to keep building around with these young guys. So, yeah, you're going to flip a switch at some point from going from contender to we're better than the Cavaliers. That's the next step. That's what takes them over the top. And I think that they're smart by waiting. And I think that it's not 100% they even have to trade for something down the line. They might just let this team build naturally and go with what they got. I mean, it might be a minor tweak here or there, adding a bench player, but we didn't mention anybody they have overseas, who they have a couple of players who look like they could transition
just drafted.
Yeah, I mean, they've got guys who can grow. And I think, like you said, they're doing it right. They're doing it patiently. Yeah, I'm sure everybody wants to win this year, but it's not going to happen. It's not in the cards.
And at some point, you'll have to add a star. And whether it's through the draft, whether it's through free agency or a trade, you're going to have to add a star. And I think Boston is in position to do that, and that's why people are freaking out that they haven't done it already. So I'll throw out names because we were going to lead off with this, but we went to a different title. It's more of Jimmy Butler, Paul George, and Gordon Hayward. Those seems like the three guys for that small forward position that you are looking to kind of take over and be that third star on that team to create a big three. So Butler, George, and Hayward. Which one is the most attractive for you, and then which one is also the one that you see happening out of those? So which one's the most likely to happen, and which one would you like most for this team?
I think Hayward would be the best fit for the team.
Completely agree.
And he brings a really nice shot from the outside. He's an unselfish guy who we've watched him kind of come up and progress his way to becoming one of the better small forwards in the league. Probably doesn't get enough credit for what he does because of where he plays, but again, I think that he would fit. Plus, you mentioned earlier the coach connection. How can you go wrong there? You've got an unselfish guy who has a really well-rounded game. The reason is just it's flat out money and it's who you know. That's a very easy move that I can see happen in this offseason. The other one that I would see next is Jimmy Butler. I think the Paul George thing is scary because of the overhead cloud of LA. I didn't realize how much he was connected to LA or how much he wanted to go back there. But when Magic Johnson made that last ditch effort, like up front, like how much? Just wondering, hypothetically, give me a number. So I think that Jimmy Butler's a safer bet because he doesn't have that loyalty to Chicago. And
Longer contract,
probably one of the best contracts for a top 10 player in the league. And you got to go, all right. Yeah, he's had a little bit of an issue with the front office there, but let's look at the front office and be like, who wouldn't? So I think you can kind of just, all right, maybe that would be a good move, but at the same time, I like his flexibility because he can play the 3 or he can play the 2. He dominates size-wise at the 2. At the 3, he can guard anyone on the court. It doesn't matter. I mean, minus the 5, but he's a great player, and he's a two-way player, but I wonder about his style and Isaiah's style matching going forward. So I honestly think that it's Gordon, a barn away, is the best fit. I think Butler has a pretty good chance of happening because of the assets and because of draft day.
Yeah, I think Hayward is probably the second most likely to happen. Just because I don't think they're going to end up pulling the trigger on Paul George, because if we're talking about, they see what's down the road, what's down the future, they're also looking at what's going to happen with Paul George and the whole thing that's floating over their head, like you said, about LA. I don't think a Paul George trade's going to happen. He's probably my least favorite option to go there as well.
And especially now he's down to a 1 year.
Yeah, and exactly. And I mean, he's a fantastic player, one of the best two-way players in the league. Has struggled a little bit this year, but then again, Indiana's just kind of struggled as a whole. But then I look at now Hayward and Butler. Butler, where you look at Butler, I think he's most likely to happen because of the assets, like we mentioned, the possibility of him being just wanting out completely out of Chicago. Yeah. And I don't see Hayward happening just because he's going to get a lot of money from the Jazz, and just the fact that he does kind of, I think, have some kind of likeness to the Jazz.
I would assume so, yeah.
Drafted him, kept him. So I think Hayward and Butler are the two that are the most likely. I would think Hayward would fit best because just the way that he does kind of play unselfishly. He's a guy that will move the ball around. He's a guy that's a good shooter, a good defender,
Do you think adding him takes them up to that level where they can go a series with Cleveland?
Well, I think they could, and especially because I don't know if he's going to be able to guard LeBron. I'll definitely take Butler or George for a guy to guard LeBron over Hayward. But the thing is that he's going to be able to let you keep your assets, and you'll be able to sign Hayward, and then you won't have to sign Isaiah Thomas. It might make your cap strengths a little tighter there to re-sign Isaiah Thomas, but then if you're keeping this pick and it's either Fultz or Ball, then you really don't need to re-sign him in a hurry. And Hayward's still young. Horford's going to get a little bit older, but you still have him for a while. Jaylen Brown will be coming into his age then. Crowder won't be too old. Bradley won't be too old. Smart won't be too old.
Again, there's this lot team, I feel like they're one of the best prepared teams for the future in the NBA. They are like the preppers for the post LeBron era.
Well, and the fact too with people talk about Minnesota having so much wealth and youth, the Lakers having so much wealth and youth, and I'm blanking on other teams. I can't think of any teams. Dave threw out teams. Phoenix is a team out there as well. Not
looking too bad.
There's a lot of teams out there with a wealth of depth, but that depth hasn't really been fully rationalized because you see some sparks in Devin Booker out in Phoenix. You see some sparks in Wiggins and Towns, but those teams are really sliding off.
How do we forget the Bucks?
The Bucks as well. And you see a spark in Giannis, but you don't see that much around him, especially with Jabari getting injured. With the Celtics, it's realized depth where you see where Brown's going to be going. You see every of these role players kind of taking shape, and they're not.
They found their own niche in in that system, and that's why I think it's the stability of having a coach and a GM who are on the same page. It's how you know that as a player, you don't got to worry about all the politicking, all the other stuff going on. You just go out there, you fit the system, and you play. And it's so much easier than having to deal with everything else. Imagine how much shit Chicago's gone through with our horribleness of Derrick Rose in the public, Jimmy Butler in the public, Joe coming out. Everybody talks because there's no one running the show. Yeah, Boston, you'll hear people. That's not a thing. Professionals.
And they're completely professional. And the final thought here is just that the fact that they're going to want to add more of a professional. And I'm not saying Jimmy Butler's not professional. I'm not saying Paul George isn't a professional. But with Gordon Hayward, he's kind of in that same spot with Utah where Utah doesn't let too much out. I mean, really, you look at that organization, you haven't heard much since Darren Williams has left. So you see a kind of a similar kind of
that's the best scenario, like you said, because you keep your assets and, you continue to build and just get better. You don't get worse. You just get better.
And if you're bringing a guy with a mentality who already has played with Brad Stevens and kind of has the shared mentality that the Utah Jazz and Boston Celtics have, you have that already in place, and you're not taking too much of a dip in talent-wise. Obviously, Jimmy Butler, Paul George can be top 10 players. Gordon Hayward's still a great, fantastic player who can really be a star in this league. So I see that it gives them more flexibility, at least for the future-wise, and also just the fact that he can be more controllable, because if you sign him now, then 5 years down the road or 4 years down the road, that's still going to look like a great contract for Gordon Hayward. So my final thoughts, I think the Celtics did not mess up. I think the Celtics are on the right path, and especially with so many picks that they do have, I think it's spectacular for what the Celtics are doing. Thank you. Oh, shit. It's just one of our videos scared me a little bit. Don't forget to check out that one. And also don't forget to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. But thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.